What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. Very happy to say that I have another guest on the channel today, a former FPL champion, Jamie. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing up. Andy, thanks for having me on the channel.
Good stuff. It was 2 seasons ago, right? 2021, 22?
Yeah, not last year, the year before.
Happy there. And I've got to ask you one question before we get into it. I mean, just to let you know what's going on, we're going to go through the draft and answer similar questions as well. But one question I had for you is, after winning FPL, I can imagine it could be quite enticing to give up because the highs of hitting number one again are almost impossible. So how did you find last season after winning it the year before?
Yeah, I mean, let's be real. All of us are addicted to this game, so I wasn't going to quit. But I definitely had a little bit more fun with it last year. No pressure. You win it, you can kind of have freedom to kind of do whatever you want, play a little fun. But I do think like last summer, doing shows and all caught up in the hype, it was like I never got a break from FPL. And so then going into the season, I kind of just got burnt out a little bit faster, and I wasn't doing as well. You couldn't do quite as well as you do when you win, so always going to be a drop from there. So it wasn't quite as fun. I kind of burnt out a little bit, tried to have some fun with it. But this year I'm kind of feeling a little bit more refreshed. Kind of signed off away from football for most of the summer, spent time with my fam, and it's been nice. So I'm getting excited, getting ready for the season.
Happy there. Plus, you're a Spurs fan. There's a lot to look forward to. Postecoglou now in charge. It's got to be a bit more exciting than having Conte there, right?
I mean, yeah. When you hear Ange talk about kind of the style, he's always talking about how exciting it is and how you're not going to be falling asleep watching. So it's a big change from kind of the past. Spurs have needed a bit of a culture change for a couple of years now, and I think it looks like it's starting to get there, and Ange is the right person to kind of make that shift. But remains to be seen how it's going to work out, and I'm looking kind of it's a period of excitement of, hey, there's something new shiny toy. See how the team plays, and I mean, we got one preseason game to look at, but looking forward to more.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good segue, to be honest, because I'm going to bring your draft up on screen. And, of course, you do have a couple of Spurs players in there. I was expecting to see 3 players. I was a little bit disappointed to only see 2. But you've got Maddison and Udogie. I think that's how you pronounce it. 4.5 million defender, should play left back. Do you think that Spurs can hit the ground running, or is that partly just a little bit of bias because, you want players from your own club, and that's absolutely fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest right off the bat. I'm a little biased because it's fun. I like having players from Spurs. Part of the reason I think I won was because Kane and Son were just killing it when I had both of them the year I won, and I think that's part of it. But so I got 2 in there. I got Maddison right now and Udogie, and Spurs, will they hit the ground running? I don't know. I think it's going to be such a big change that the tactics that the players are going to be playing. I think it's going to be a little bit rough at times, but I think it's going to be like an open attack and maybe an open defense with some mistakes, depending on the personnel that they get in to play center back, to pair with Romero. I think we could see some high scoring games on both ends, or times when Spurs just can't break somebody down and they make a mistake and are open at the back. It's a little tricky to tell exactly what it is, but I think it'll take a little bit of time for Ange's ideas to fully set in and for them to really hit the ground running. So, you don't, by no means are Spurs essential to start the season. I think it's definitely you can wait and see how it goes.
Yeah, that's probably fair to say. Obviously, we've got, we're recording this on Friday. It's probably not going to go out until Tuesday. We're still going to have 2.5 weeks till the season starts by the time people watch this. And, there'll be more pre-season games and stuff like that. But you're expecting Udogie to be first choice? Because I suspect a lot of people are going to watch this and haven't even considered him or even knew that he was 4.5 million. So he's a left back. I guess the other competition is mostly, Perisic is probably going to leave, seems what a lot of people think. And then you got Reguilon as well. Do you think Udogie's going to be first choice?
I think so. I mean, he's 20 years old, but he looks like he's got more talent than most of the left backs at the club. Whether Ange throws him in right away or takes a cautious approach, I think it depends on who stays. You know, Sessegnon being injured, he can't get a break in this league, but that also opens up more opportunities for him. I think he's the best one we've got, and is the best long-term play. Whether he's starts all the games right off the beginning, I don't really know. Right now, I've got him as my first bench option. I think he's kind of high upside. I don't really love a lot of the 4-5 defenders across the league right now, especially from the start. So I'm okay with putting him in. I think there's going to be a little bit more, seeing what Ange does in preseason, and I think they've got like 3 more preseason games, and seeing if he becomes part of that starting 11 or a parent starting 11. And if he is, I think he's definitely in my team just because of that price point and kind of compared to the other options. In the last game, one of the things that I saw, there was a moment when Spurs were playing out of the back, and they got it over to Udogie, just kind of at the beginning of the middle third on the defensive side, and he just turned on the jets and left Bowen behind him, which isn't an easy thing to do. So the kid has some speed. He's tall. He scored a goal in their preseason game, although I don't really read too much into just whether you score or not. But I think he's going to be an exciting play at that price point. And Spurs aren't going to be the worst defense in the league. They're probably not going to be the best. But they could be somewhere around mid-table, and for 4 or 5, it's pretty great.
Yeah, no, I like to think. I suspect that he will be the kind of player that will become more popular the closer we get to game week 1. And I certainly wouldn't see someone like Ben Davies speeding past Bowen. So yeah, maybe he will be first choice. I mean, just quickly on Maddison, the more I think about him, the more I like him, because he was such a good player at Spurs. He's had nearly at Leicester, he's had nearly 200 points. He's got 9 goals, 10 assists, I think, last year. So I can only imagine what he will do with players like Son and Kane around him instead, as long as Kane stays, of course. I just think he's so creative that he's got, having those 2 players that are great finishers. I think 7.5 will end up being cheap. I guess at the start of the season, lots of midfielders. That's why you're in a 3-5-2. That's why a lot of other managers are as well. But I think he's going to be in a lot of teams eventually. Just on your defence, I mean, Gabriel, Estupiñán and Trent, very, very popular. We don't really need to go over what the strengths of those players are. But do you have any kind of feelings or concerns about any of them where you could see them dropping out of the team, or are they pretty much set already?
Yeah. Trent is always, is he going to pay up to the price at 8 million? Is Liverpool going to get enough cleans to justify that? I mean, he's going to have the attacking output, but are they going to have the defensive stats to back that up and to make that a good option defensively? So you hope, but you don't really know. Every time I tinker, I'm like, I don't really end up using all of the budget that I take when I take Trent out. I've got the first draft I made, I put together, I had 2 million left in the bank and I didn't have Trent. And so I was like, I can't go all the way to Trent, but I don't really want to use all the budget I have. So I kind of find myself putting them in because I'm basically almost there. It's not as big of a sacrifice. But that's I think the biggest bit of caution with the defense. Gabriel, I think at 5, a lot of the 5s, like great value there. Yeah. I think in that price point. And I made a draft. I had 4-5-0 defenders, and I was like, I'm happy with this. So I'm happy to have Gabriel and Estupiñán. I think I haven't really looked at Shaw, another popular one. I'm not really sure I love Man U's defense as much as others. So I'm pretty good with the 3 that I've got. But Porro may come in, although I probably wouldn't have Porro and Udogie. I'd probably find a way to get one or the other. So those are kind of the main ones on my mind.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same with Trent. I said this on a video the other day. I don't mind downgrading him, but I don't need all that money. So it's kind of like, is there any point? I don't want to leave the money in the bank. I don't necessarily want to go for a super, super strong bench. It just seems easier to have him, even if the fixtures aren't necessarily great. Eventually, we will want Liverpool players in, so maybe it's just easier to start with him. I'm kind of similar on Luke Shaw. Obviously, Anana's now come into the game as well, so he came in today. Again, we're recording on Friday, so he's 5 million. I think it's just a bit annoying when Man United's opening 4 fixtures because they've got your boys, Spurs away, and Arsenal away. So if the first 4 was slightly easier, it might be easier to justify him. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm the same with you as Trent. I think I'm just going to get him because the money saved doesn't seem as great as it could be. On midfield, we'll just go for a couple of these players. Bruno Fernandes, you got one Man United attacker. Is he in there just because of budget restrictions, i.e. you didn't have the 0.5 for Rashford, or do you think he could just be a better option all round?
I think a little bit of both. I think the pens is a big factor. And I think last year, Man U got way fewer pens than normal. And I think that could, if it normalizes, I think Fernandes gets a bit of a boost there. I think also with Mount and potentially if they get another striker, I think Rashford was just doing so well last year. They kept feeding him the ball. I think you may see a little bit different tactics with Mount in there. And there's just enough change that I like, a lot of people are going in on Rashford, and rightfully so. I think he's still a great pick. I like to play a little bit different, at least somewhere. Most of my team is pretty template. It's not like I'm doing anything crazy. But I like to, at least take one risk, take one big ownership switch where, I can maybe find an edge and get a little bit there. And Rashford, I think, is one of those places where I can do that. And I don't feel like I'm missing out too much on having him, given that I've got Fernandes, and I don't really want to go both of them because I think that's going all in on their attack, which could be the right play, but I'm kind of taking being a little cautious with Man U's attack, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. And obviously, penalty takers in FPL, they are those kind of players that all of a sudden you look like a genius if they get a few. And Man United are those teams that in the past have had a lot of penalties. Remember, Bruno Fernandes' first season was absolutely incredible. That's why he went I think he was 12 million at one point. So yeah, for 8.5, he's definitely capable of outscoring that. One other midfielder I want to talk about, because I mean, Saka and Mboma are in a lot of teams. We've covered them quite a bit. But Phil Foden, is he just in there because you love the guy and you think he's a great pick, or is this a minutes thing where you think at the start of the season he's going to do a bit better? Is he someone that could leave? How do you feel about Foden at the moment?
Yeah, when the game came out, I think he was one of the first names in for me. I think he's such a talented player. I think I started with him last year, and I Man City, I feel like you have to have. Not have to. I feel like it's really good to have multiple Man City players. I've been trying to find a way to fit a defender into, but I just don't know which ones are nailed right now. And I think that's the biggest thing about Man City.
And they're signing another one, of course. Vardio looks like he's coming.
Right. So who's going to play? And I like Foden. I think he's too good to sit on the bench. And even if he is benched one game, he's going to probably get minutes as a sub. I think with KDB out, there's just more opportunity up there. Mahrez leaving, unless they're buying other attacking midfielders, which they could. I think there's more certainty for Foden's minutes, and when he plays, he puts up good stats, good XG. He's in and around the goals, so I like him there. If I didn't go with Foden, I'd think about trying to find a way to get Alvarez in alongside Haaland. It's Grealish is, I guess, the other one that probably one of those three is the only people I'd really look to if I'm going a Man City attacker. And right now I got Foden, then Alvarez, and then Grealish as far as kind of which ones I've thought of. And it depends on structure. Obviously, Alvarez being a forward makes things a little bit trickier. But, I think Foden's just really talented. I think he's going to get minutes. Pep could always throw a curveball out there, but willing to take that risk.
I'm going to ask you a question about. There's someone actually asked a question about Man City attackers, which is why I'm just going to we'll go through that now. Obviously, you mentioned Grealish, so you're potentially happy to have him depending on other options and whatever happens over the next few weeks. But you kind of put him third on the list, and the reason I want to ask about him is because his and Foden's ownership is quite similar, or at least it was last time I checked in FPL. But I never see people in the community talking about Grealish. It's always Foden. Their underlying numbers are pretty similar in terms of expected goals, expected assists. I think Foden is slightly higher. And if they get the same minutes, I agree that Foden's the better option. But is there like a perception with Grealish that, I don't know, I feel like no one seems to think he's that good of an option, even though he's only 7.5 million as well. Like, what do you think the reason for that is?
I think everybody just thinks he's going to be hungover all season from
probably
celebrations. No, I think it could be that people had Grealish last year when he wasn't scoring points and can be swayed by that. And people had Foden when he was, and because it was kind of clear when he was starting. I think they're both decent options. It's a minutes thing. I think Foden just tends to be more dynamic and score more goals. And Grealish, I think, has had a lot of chances, but doesn't necessarily put him all in, or maybe gets more assists. And that may not actually be right if you look at the numbers, but that's just kind of the feeling you get when you're watching and what I remember. So I don't think I agree with you. I haven't heard much of Grealish anywhere. And I think it's because if people are going with a Man City mid, I feel like Foden is the better pick. Maybe just because I think he can continue to step up his game too and improve, where Grealish is a little bit more, you kind of know what you're getting with him. And he was starting on that left wing all at the end of the season for a good chunk of time. So he may get more minutes, could be. But I don't know. I just feel like Foden's the better pick. I'd probably go there just for fun, rather than even if Grealish ends up being better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally just playing devil's advocate because I'm the same. If I had the choice between the two and they were going to get similar minutes, I would pick Foden. I think a lot of people would expect him to be better in front of goal and stuff like that. I just think in Grealish, and stuff can change season to season, but in Grealish, you have potentially got a 7.5 million Man City attacker that's basically nailed. Like at the end of last season, like you said, no one else was getting into that left wing spot apart from him, other than when European games happened and the Premier League was won. Obviously, then there was a lot of rotation. But yeah, I find it interesting. I wonder whether the ownership will change a bit towards game week 1. But right now, yeah, I kind of agree. Foden's great. One more question.
It'll be interesting to see, I guess, what Pep rolls out in preseason and the Community Shield. I think that's going to sway a lot of where people land here.
Yeah, if we see Foden line up on the left in the Community Shield, that might that propel a massive bandwagon, I think. And that's obviously, it is a friendly game, but it never really is. It's always a good indication about what's going to happen in game week 1 and who the kind of key 11 are. So yeah, I fully agree there. One more question on the draft, then we'll get into some of the community questions. You got a 4.5 million goalkeeper in there, Flecken. He's actually in my draft as well. Is that a spot that you just want to spend 4.5 on? You got any thoughts towards a 5 or a 5.5?
I really 4 or 5, I think, is generally the way that I like to play. I don't really like to spend as much budget on that. And we kind of don't know a ton. We're going to get things wrong in our game week 1 teams, and we're going to wild card out of it and make changes. So I'm not really worried about spending the extra 0.5. I don't think it's as valuable from a goalkeeper perspective as putting that 0.5 somewhere else in the team. The jump from 4-5 defender to 5-0 defender, I think, is so much greater. I'd rather spend that there. Depends on what decisions you're looking at. And I see Flecken, assuming that he is first choice and Raya is leaving. If that doesn't happen, I think everyone's going to have to pivot around, but I think I'd still keep it at a 4-5. John Stone, I don't really love Pickford, but I'm just not as excited by the 5-0 goalkeepers. And I don't really want to spend it on Ramsdale because I want 3 Arsenal players in my main field. And then Onana, again, like I said earlier with Shaw, I'm just not as high on their defense, given that they've got 2 easy fixtures, could totally be cleans. 2 much more difficult fixtures you expect they wouldn't get cleans in. So you're really relying on those 2 home easy games. If they give up a fluke goal because Man U's trying to play with a new high line with Onana in the back, like it could be a bit of a risk, and I don't really want to go there.
Yeah, I think it's slightly different to Spurs because obviously Ten Hag's already been there a year, and there's not a huge amount of changes to the squad, but it is something to consider for those people, and that's definitely myself included, going for Shaw and Onana, it is going to be a slightly different way of playing. Like, they are going to play out from the back even more, and while Onana is fully capable of doing that, it might be just one of those things that's like new to all the players overall. Because with De Gea, like, it did happen, but it always happened badly, and there was always that kind of hesitation to make the pass. So yeah, maybe that's one of the reasons to kind of avoid Man United defence. I suspect I will have Onana in my draft because I just really want him, but it is something to consider. All right, let's go off the draft. We'll answer some questions. I'm going to skip the one about Man City because we basically already covered it. You kind of touched on wildcard and out of any issues or mistakes we make in game week 1. We got a question about wildcard. What's your rough plan for the first wildcard, and how does this affect your game week selection? Do you ever plan for that, when to use it, or do you just use it as and when?
I think 2 years ago when I won, there was kind of a clear fixture shift for a couple of the big teams. Chelsea had a huge turnaround where they had some tough fixtures early and then it pivoted. There was a couple where right at that game week 8 mark, there was a change. And so it was a logical spot to do it. So I remember going into that season and I did kind of plan to make that shift just based on where the fixtures laid out. Last year was obviously a little bit different with the World Cup. And so we could also take a shorter viewpoint on it, and it really changed the dynamic of what you wanted to do. I actually went risky in mind to wild card early, and then I ended up being more patient and not finding the value, and I waited and I wild carded late. This year I'm kind of in a wait and see. I haven't really made too many decisions around when I'm going to wild card. I think I'm probably that game week 8 kind of time frame where you learn enough about what's going on and all the things that we didn't know that we thought we knew in preseason that actually is totally wrong. It gives you a little bit of time to build that narrative and that story, and then you can pick the right players and jump on them. But early or kind of later, I think both are viable. I haven't really factored that in too much just because of the way the fixtures have laid out this year.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. Like, I don't go into a season saying I'm definitely going to wildcard here or not. I'll kind of use it if I need it. But I don't think, like, I can't think of, apart from Chelsea in game week 3, which is probably not going to be worth wildcarding for this year, I don't think there's any need to kind of plan a wildcard for the first 5 or 6 weeks, and that's probably the kind of length I would be looking at anyway. So you can just decide after that. There is one, you could maybe call it a fixture swing. Obviously, a lot of people are thinking about going without Liverpool players at all, especially Salah. And they got some good fixtures, I think, early enough, but they have got some tough ones as well. But from game week 9, they've got Everton at home, Forest at home, Luton away. They're 3 great fixtures. Brentford at home is not bad. Man City away is not great, but then it's Fulham at home, Sheffield United away, Palace away. So they've got a run from like game week 9 to 16, which is pretty decent, where in most seasons you would want at least 2 Liverpool players. And I think if you're going in without Salah, it's going to be difficult to get to him. And look, you don't usually wildcard for just 2 players. But if everything else is, if there's other stuff to deal with and you want to get those Liverpool players, that might be a time to do it. But I think either way, it doesn't affect what you're going to pick in game week 1, really. So I personally wouldn't worry about it too much. I don't think there's enough to be gained from what I've looked into, at least. Okay, obviously we talked a bit about Spurs. That's another side of London. Chelsea. Harry says, I feel like Chelsea defenders are being overlooked, especially Badia Sheila. What are your thoughts? So you got no Chelsea defenders. There's lots of options there. There's James and Chilwell both at 5.5, so a bit more expensive than Gabriel and Estepinian. And it's likely that 1 or 2 of their centre-backs are going to be 4.5. We don't really know who's first choice right now, but apart from Thiago Silva, they're all 4.5. So you got any thoughts on Chelsea, or do you want to see how Pochettino kind of gets them playing first?
Yeah, it's a little bit about waiting and seeing how they do. The year I won, I wildcarded and I brought in both James and Chilwell, and it was the perfect time, and they did amazing. But then later, as we all know, everybody who's had Reece knows the ups and downs with Reece and the injuries and the 1-pointers, and I think there's just, again, like I said earlier, so much value at 5.0 that I'm willing. I think they're great picks. Personally, I think I'm just going to wait and see. I might bring one of them in game week 3 or in that range if they're looking good. But haven't seen myself really wanting to start with one of them just because I kind of like some of the other defenders and options better. Not that they're bad picks. I think it's great. And Chelsea's just, I mean, there were periods of time last year where they were just so bad, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to turn it around so fast with Pochettino and see how that goes. Definitely watching them to see what happens. But if we see in preseason that they're super involved and looking great, then I'd consider it. But kind of wait and see for me right now.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned your wild card when you won FPL because I feel like everyone's recent memories of Reece James are just 0-1, 0-1. That's it. But there was that period where you wildcarded, and the reason I hate that period is because I wildcarded the week before, I think, and I got Azpilicueta and Rudiger because the fixture run was great, and I think at that point Reece James and Chilwell weren't. They just didn't look quite as good. I literally went a week too early, and then the week after, everyone jumped on those two. They smashed it, and then when I bought them in, they got injured. So, yeah. Bad for me, but great for you. And it's a reminder that Reece James and Ben Chilwell, they can be good, but appreciate there are obviously some risks as well. Another Chelsea question: is Sterling this year's Rashford? Big drop in price, but could potentially score big under Pochettino. A player that has scored 200 plus points before, has been priced as much as 11 or 12 million, I think. What do you think about Sterling? Can he regain those FPL points this year?
Totally. I think Sterling's been in a couple of my tinkers as I try to figure out who can I fit in. He's somebody that I could still see myself finding a space for come game week 1 in my team. If I don't, I can see myself going there in game week 3 when their fixtures turn. I think they've letting it home. So he's definitely, I think, a great option. Again, it's a little bit of that. How's Pochettino going to use these guys? And that's, I think, one of the benefits of preseason, particularly for the teams that have a big shift in tactics, is like take that new information and try to see how's it going to play out come the season. You can never make all the conclusions that you want, but it could give you some hints into how Sterling's going to play. And so, with Nkunku in there and how that whole dynamic changes, I'm very intrigued with Sterling. I think at that price, it could be, a huge point swing, kind of like Rashford was last year, where he was underpriced and was scoring all the time. Sterling could definitely find that form again. So I'm intrigued.
Yeah, same here. I really like the option of Sterling and Nkunku as well. I think it'd be nice if in pre-season if we could find out who's on penalties. I think because they don't really have an obvious choice. I think most people would say it's Nkunku, but we don't know that for sure. So I don't think Sterling's going to get him because his record's not great, but you never know. So yeah, I like both those picks. Like you said, potentially very underpriced.
If Reece James is on pens, that's a game changer.
If Reece James is on penalties, there is no way I will go without him in game week 1, not, unless he's injured, which he could well be because he has been before. We kind of already touched on this. I guess it's slightly different actually. It's not about wildcards. How many fixtures in advance do you look at when choosing your team? I.e., is 3 game weeks too short, 8 game weeks too long? Does it change for different positions, different players for you?
Yeah, I think it doesn't really change too much, but across different positions. But I look at more the 5 to 8 range when I'm looking to plan. I think particularly in the season, I'm more looking 5. At the beginning of the season, maybe 8, just because I know this has got to last me a little bit longer. But when you think about how many transfers you have between the start and game week 8, you could have 7 different players than your starting 11 in there by that time. So if you're really picking players because they've got good fixtures in game week 5 or 6 or 7, you're putting yourself in a position where you've got to rely on them and they may not even be in your team by then. So I like to take it more like 5 games and put a heavier emphasis on the first couple to see, because they may not be in your team a little bit later.
Yeah, I think that last point you made is really important. It's probably something I don't mention enough. Is like I will probably look the same, about 5 or 6 to 8 fixtures ahead, maybe a little bit longer for a goalkeeper, but they're kind of boring to talk about. But yeah, you've got to put emphasis on the first few fixtures because obviously a player down the line could easily get injured, then you miss out on those good fixtures later on. I think that's why some people are kind of hesitant on Chelsea and Spurs. in particular, because we know they've got those good fixtures from game week 3, but the first two just aren't that great, and it's whether or not you want to carry them through. I mean, it's not that the first two fixtures for either team are completely awful, but they could be slightly better. I think it's putting people off. They'd rather just wait to that fixture swing rather than getting them in now, and then by the time you get to the good fixture in game week 3, I don't know, maybe they're injured or maybe they've been awful and their price has dropped and stuff like that. So I think that's putting a few people out. You're obviously not worried because you're a Spurs fan, right? But
I mean, but it's right to be a little worried. There's a lot of change in both those sides, and who knows exactly how fast it's going to click. Who knows who's going to emerge as the best option? And if you put yourself in a position where you have some price flexibility and you're willing to downgrade somebody you started with to get to Sterling because he's showing that he's in form and he's in good positions in this new system. I think that's a good tactic and approach to have a game one and being cautious is I think totally valid. I'm going to go to Spurs because I like Spurs and I like when players on my team do well, and but I don't expect most people to have Spurs just because of the big question marks around their team, and particularly around the attackers. Like I've played around with Son a bit in my team. I think he was in my first draft, more out of hope than anything. And it's going to be really interesting to see. He missed the first preseason game that Spurs had because he had just got to Australia, so he only had 2 days of training or something like that. But the way that this attacking 5 really play, it'll be interesting because Kane is the type of player who likes to drop back, drop deep, right, and play Son in behind. Postecoglou's system is really built on like the threat in behind, pushing that back line back, and then opening up space in between the lines from mid to that back line. And that's where I think Maddison can thrive, assuming that Kane actually does press. But it could be Son coming in more narrow and making that threat to go deep and behind the line that keeps them back. So he could be the one that's making those runs. It's just a big question mark there that I'm not surprised people are cautious. Rightfully so. They weren't great last year.
Yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by Son because I just feel like he definitely cannot be worse than last year. Like out of all the seasons we've seen him play for FPL, especially from a FPL points point of view, doesn't sound right, but it was awful. But I just feel like there has to be a resurgence this year. Whether or not Kane's there, I think Son will just be much better. And I've seen a lot of discussion on Postecoglou, like he likes to keep his wingers wide and stuff like that. But I think when you got a player like Son, you have to get him near the goal. Like a manager has to also adapt to the players he's got. And Son is not the kind of player you just leave out wide, right? You want him running in behind and getting close to goal. So I think he's one of those players that could easily just become a bandwagon straight away. Because as soon as you see him score a couple of goals, you're like, okay, we've got Son back. Yeah. So it's just, I think for a lot of people, it's like it's him or Rashford, and obviously we know how good Rashford was last year, and I think we're just expecting that to happen again. It's just, I think Son's for those managers that are maybe happy to take a little bit of a risk, and it sounds stupid saying risk for Son because he's such a good player, but I guess it is based on last year, right?
Yeah, it's based on last year, and I mean he came out saying he had the hernia issue and he was suffering last year, and he's going to show everybody the sun he's back. But his game, he's a little bit older, he's over 30, and his game is built on speed behind that line, and there could be a possibility that he is declining a little bit in that that burst speed that he has. So I don't think so. I'm hopeful, and I think that we'll get the Sonny back that we had 2 years ago. Maybe not to that extent, but at least something more like what we're used to seeing. And so I'll definitely have him on my team at some point this season. Whether it's game week 1 remains to be seen. But I may find myself finding a way to get him in game week 3 or 4 as their fixtures turn a little bit better. We'll see.
Absolutely. Okay, last question. And one of these players is in your team, which is why I didn't talk about it earlier. So you've got Mbeumo from Brentford. This question is, do you think having Mbeumo and Wissa, I hope I'm saying that right, I've said his name so many times in the video, I think that's right, is too risky? Haven't seen many people doubling up on them. So I guess there's 2 parts there. One is Mbeumo and Wissa, they're 6.5 and 6 million. Is that worth it? And what generally do you think about attacking double ups? Does it bother you? I mean, if the players are good, right, they're good. Doesn't matter if they're from the same team.
Yeah, if you want to go in on if you believe a team's attack is good and you're going to get, they're creating a lot of XG, I see no point in avoiding just because, one may get the bounces and the other one may not. Mbomo and Vissa, I'm not as I don't know if you need to go there. I don't know if I have enough faith in Brentford's attack without Tony to go all in on Brentford attack. I think that's really maybe the hesitancy there. Not that either of the two of them aren't a good pick. I think I don't want to throw all my chips in on Brentford's attack because they got Spurs who will probably be open in the back. I can't remember all the rest of their fixtures, but they're relatively decent. But I think if you're going to go with if you're going with Mbomo and you're going to go with a 6 mil forward, I think I look more to Ferguson if he's getting minutes rather than going there, or keep Wissa and take Mbomo and switch him to Matoma or Enciso. Something like that I think is more what I would do. Not that they're bad picks individually, but it's just too much of throwing my chips in on that team. If it's Man City, I'm happy to do it, right? Because that they're going to accumulate tons of XG and there's probably enough goals to go around. Whereas Brentford, not as much faith.
Yeah, I've looked at both of them. I think I've only got Mbomo on my team at the moment because I think he's going to be on penalties and stuff. But it's a good point. I think Tony missed it. It's a similar situation to Brighton. Obviously, they've lost a few key players as well. Caicedo's probably going to go. That hasn't happened yet, but he probably will. McAllister, etc. So yeah, Tony could be a big miss. I'm just hoping that they'll, for the price, they'll still do well. I think the £6 million forward bracket's a bit dodgy, to be honest. I think if you can, you want to spend a bit more. It depends how you're structuring your squad, but yeah, interesting, cool. I think we'll leave it there. We've answered a lot of questions, gone for your draft, much appreciated. Thank you very much for joining me again.
You bet, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Good luck this season. I hope you win it. It'd be very cool for someone eventually to win it and then win it again. But I think I'm not a maths person, but I suspect the odds are very, very low. Very low.
They are. I'm not a statistician, but yeah, the odds are very low. You have to, to win everything, not everything, but most everything has to go right. But to do it twice is an anomaly.
Well, you never know.
But I'll try. If you don't go into game week 1 with the goal of winning, you're not doing it right. So give it a try.
Well, hopefully I'll win, and if not, I hope you win, because double winner would be very cool. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me, much appreciated, and good luck to you and Spurs this season. If you have enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you again soon.